North Korea, one of the poorest countries in the world. Average earnings here are only $1 a month. And yet, despite increasingly stringent UN economic sanctions, somehow it's still getting enough foreign exchange to build nuclear weapons and to finance the luxury lifestyle of its elite. How is this happening?
네, 형님.
나 너희랑 말하면 안 돼. 우리 감시받고 있어. 우리의 돈은 딴 데로 흘러가. 너무 힘들다.
This film gets inside one of the largest and most secretive people trafficking operations in the world.
North Korea is the biggest illegal job agency in the world.
The investigation uncovers North Koreans toiling in Russia, China, and even in the European Union.
넌 네가 사람이라고 생각해? 너는 개고 이 쓰레기나 처먹어. 더 이상 인간이길 포기하라고.
Welcome to the hidden world of what North Koreans call dollar heroes. The investigation starts out here in Seoul, South Korea's capital. 30,000 people have managed to flee North Korea. Many of them live here. But very few of them are willing to speak about North Korea's overseas work brigades. They're afraid of what might happen to their relatives still in the north. Eventually, one person is willing to give the inside track on the system and how it's been going on for decades. Park was a dollar hero in the 1980s. Sent to Siberia by the regime, he was made to drive trucks in a timber camp for 7 years.
여기는 사람을 사람처럼 취급 안 하고 소나 말처럼 무지한 노동 강도를 안겨주는 곳이지. 밤이 12시간 막교대를 시키냐. 그때는 오직 정부에 대한 그 우라가 치밀이지.
The reason Park is willing to talk is because he managed to get his whole family out of North Korea. He fled in 2005. His son, Yoo Song, and his wife, Sun Kum, followed a few years later.
우리가 국가에 얼마나 착취당하는지 이거는 신경 못 썼어. 기본 월급은 그러니까 거기서 7%만 나한테 돈을 주고 나머지는 몽땅 북한 돈을 바뀌어가지고 그러니까 완전히 국가는 착취 다 해치우지. 그걸 이제 여러 명이 러시아 측에다가 막 제기하고 당신들이 우리한테 직접 돈 달라 이렇게 하면 저래 아예 역적으로 아예 역적 행위로 없어져요. 관리소.
그 가기 위해서 왜 가기를 결심했어요?
가정이 가난을 좀 끊어보기 싶어서.
거기 가서 7년 동안 생활할 때는 한 번도 안 알았어요?
알았지.
아팠어요?
1년에 2번씩 그저 무서운 감기를 앓지. 그때는 이불 뒤집어 쓰고 그저 눈물이 하염없이 나오지.
왜 울었어요?
거기는 따뜻한 온돌도 아니고 침대에서 누워 앓는데 야, 따뜻한 온돌도 그립고 일하다 죽는 사람들도 많이 보고.
All this happened to Park some 30 years ago. How has it changed since then? One man with insider knowledge was, until recently, a high-level North Korean official. The interview has to take place in a secret and secure location. Tae Young-ho was North Korea's deputy ambassador to London before he fled to Seoul in 2016.
태영호 공사는 탈북 외교관 중 최고위급에 해당합니다.
Tae Yong-ho vanished from the North Korean embassy in London in August.
North Korea is only about 50 miles away from this city, Seoul, Tae Yong-ho's new home.
For the first time, Tae Yong-ho has agreed to speak about this most sensitive of issues, how the regime gets much of its foreign exchange.
지난 30여 년 동안 진짜 오늘 현재는 5만 명의 근로자들이 나가고 있는데 근로자들이 거기 나가서 그렇게 피땀처럼 벌어들인 돈이 북한으로 흘러들어가서 그것이 평화적 건설에 쓰였다면 북한은 지금보다 엄청난 정도의 산업 근대화가 이루어졌을 것이고 이 숱한 돈이 그러면 어디에 흘러갔느냐. 당연히 이 숱한 돈은 김씨 일가의 그런 개인 일가의 사치와 또 북한의 핵과 미사일과 같은 군사부문에 쓰였다는 건 자만한 사실이 아니겠습니까?
The whole operation is highly secretive. Little is known about its scale, how exactly it works, and where it works.
Hi, how are you? Have you managed to talk to the lawyer?
Yes. She's got 3 cases.
Over the course of 3 years, a team of 20 investigative journalists from Germany, Poland, Russia, and South Korea have been trying to get inside the operation and find the answers.
But I'll try. And also, apparently, there's North Koreans working on.
There are reports that 30 years after Park's ordeal, there are still dollar heroes working in Siberia. So some of the team traveled to Blagoveshchensk, a city of around 200,000 on Russia's border with China. A local Russian human rights organization is in touch with some North Korean construction workers here. The journalists hope that one of the dollar heroes is willing to show them where they're working. Chinese investments mean that buildings are springing up all over the city. There's heavy demand for cheap construction labor. A Korean journalist, part of the team, calls one of the workers.
지금 어디 계십니까? 아, 네. 저희가 얼굴이라든지 이름을 말하지 않고도 인터뷰를 할 수가 있습니다. 저희가 제이호텔 앞쪽으로 있는데 저희가 제이호텔 쪽으로 나가도록 하겠습니다. 네, 곧 오십시오. 네.
네, 너무 감사합니다.
너무 감사합니다.
네, 네.
The North Korean worker warns that he cannot be seen talking to journalists.
선생님 지금 이렇게 도망 나와 계시는데 만약에 잡히시면 어떻게 되시나요?
잡히면 죽지 뭐. 잡히면 우선 팔, 관절, 엉덩이를 꽂고 있었다.
팔하고 다리를 꺾어요? 러시아에서?
아니, 북한 애들이.
북한 애들이?
네, 북한 애들이.
그러면 지금 혹시 블라고베찬스크에 북한 분들이 몇 명이 계신지 아세요?
많아요. 많다고. 원래 여기 굉장히 많아요. 여기 한 500명 정도, 500명 정도.
몇 개나 찍으신 것 같으세요, 건물을?
내가 집 지은 거 저기 짓고 저기 짓고 많지 뭐.
And not only residential buildings, even entire shopping centers were built by dollar heroes. The next day, the team visits some of the building sites the worker has pointed out.
자, 안녕하세요, 선생님. 선생님, 저 조선분이시죠? 아니 그럼 여기 일하러 오셨습니까? 언제 오셨습니까?
여기 들어온 지 한 3년 되고.
3년 되셨습니까?
3년 되고 매해 왔다 갔다 하고 지금.
아니 그러면은 3년 전에 오셨어요?
14년도.
14년도에. 그럼 어디가 혹시 고향이십니까? 상암부터? 그러면은 꽤나 그 중국 국경 쪽에 가까우신 데 계셨나요? 전화 받으십시오. 네네. 네. 아, 그렇습니까? 네. 아, 그렇습니까? 아유, 죄송합니다. 네, 죄송합니다. 네.
It's a sign of just how sensitive this North Korean operation is. Within minutes of talking to a worker, the team is being watched. And soon after, Russian security agents knock on the team's door.
Проблема, что когда она сдает квартиру иностранцам, она обязана прийти и поставить их вас на учет.
Как бы это законно, могут они прийти в квартиру и просто контроль провести. Окей, а когда можно позвонить? Вы можете в такой случай, есть кто-то, с кем можно поговорить?
Это Россия.
The team are told to go with the officers.
So we are in front of the police station, the immigration service people.
They came at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and then there were 3 men, 1 policeman and 2 officers of the UFMS, and they knocked really loud and...
They took our passport and they wanted to see the record of us, and they also took our card, USBs and cards.
So now we're sitting in the car and we're waiting for them now.
After 4 hours, the team get their passports back. They're told it's a routine check, but in truth, it's more likely a warning. There's no choice but to leave Blagoveshchensk. But the team's inquiries confirm that the North Korean forced labor system there is very active. Remco Breuker is a professor of Korean history in the Netherlands. But for the last few years, he's been focusing on North Korea's overseas labor program. He's now recognized as the world's leading expert on North Korean work brigades.
The dimension is large. North Korea and Russia, they concluded a new treaty to send more people to Russia. There used to be many lumberjacks in Siberia, but that seems to have gone down. And what you now find is many people, for example, in Vladivostok, which is just a few hours from North Korea, of course. There are many North Koreans there working in shipyards and mainly, again, in construction.
Because of the problems in Blagoveshchensk, the team decides to follow up some leads in Vladivostok, a city of 600,000 close to China and North Korea. Vladivostok's strategic location makes it an important trading hub. It's the largest Russian port on the Pacific Ocean. A new team has a new cover story. They're investors wanting to buy flats. They start looking for blocks of apartments under construction where North Koreans could be working. At one of the sites, there's evidence, a handwritten note about how to pronounce Russian words in Korean. They decide to investigate. The Korean team member and his colleagues are wearing hidden cameras.
아, 조국 사람이에요? 아, 고향이 어디세요? 오셨어, 조국에서. 조국, 평양. 야, 우리 외할아버지는 저기 성진 몇 명 정도나 일하세요?
한 10명 정도.
이 일 끝나면 여기 얼마씩 받으세요?
아직도 뭐,
네.
우리 카피단이 책임자가 다.
카피단 책임자. 책임자는 러시아 사람이에요? 아니면? 조국 분들?
그래,
공사하러? 네, 안녕히 가세요. 예. 아이고, 고생하십니다. 선생님 고향이 어디세요? 평양. 무슨 구역에서 왔어요? 낙랑구역 한번 갔었는데.
Then the North Korean captain appears. The team leaves, so as not to again attract the attention of the Russian authorities. A local journalist puts them in touch with a North Korean who fled the work brigade some years ago and now lives in hiding.
무서운 게 나는 옛날에 내가 이게 경찰이 제일 무서운데 임시보호 이거를 턱 받으니까 경찰은 안 무서워요 지금. 그렇지만 안 무서. 이 북한 사람들이 제일 무섭더라고. 알까워.
He explains how his work brigade was organized.
옛날에는 무슨 돈을 이렇게 주는 게 아니고 여기서 따라 돈을 주는 게 아니고 돈을 여기서 몰래 해서 자기 한 게 그게 돈이지. 저기 들어가면 그걸 다 무슨 바치고 뭐 치고 그것도 받는 게 종이장이 받아요. 무슨 돈이 아니고. 그런 거기서 이렇게 말하자면 직장장이라든가 무슨 지배인이라든가 이렇게 그 사람들은 거기서 골라서 이게 다 어떻게 어떻게 어렵게 해서라도 그렇게 딱딱해서라도 돈을 바치게 한다고. 그거 다 돈이다고.
Early in the morning, after the end of his shift, another North Korean worker secretly talks about how the system works.
어떤 사람들은 50 버는 사람도 있고 어떤 사람은 100도 벌어. 하지만 아무것도 못 버는 사람도 있어. 제법 많은 사람이 빚이 생겨서 돌아가는 경우도 있어. 사람들이 이렇게 적게 버는 이유는 당자금 때문이야.
정확하게 뭐라고 하나요?
어떤 사람들은 당자금이라고 하고 어떤 사람들은 이걸 혁명자금이라고 부르기도 해. 이 돈을 못 내면 더 이상 여기 있을 수 없어. 10년 전에는 15,000루블이었어. 하지만 지금은 2배가 됐어. 현재는 3만 루블 내야 하지만 조만간 45,000에서 5만 루블까지 오를 거야.
According to experts, this suggestion that the so-called party duty payment is increasing is almost certainly evidence that tougher UN sanctions are cutting North Korea's legitimate export earnings. This piles further pressure on the overseas work brigades to send back even more foreign currency. The nuclear program is clearly increasingly dependent on their forced labor. 50,000 rubles, $900 is 1.5 times the average monthly wage of a Russian worker. How can a dollar hero make that much money and more?
여기 벌써 한두 번 나온 사람들은 좀 그거 아니까. 그 무슨 지배인한테 뭐 좀 돈 줄여주고 청구 나가서 이렇게 또 돈 벌어서 주면 이렇게. 옛날 사람들이 이렇게 일했어요. 아침부터 저녁까지 일해요. 일하고 저녁에 이 러시아 거기 어디서 집 하는 일이 있어요. 거기. 그러면 거기 나가요. 아침까지 일해요. 또 밤새껏 일해요. 이게 돈이니까.
A look on local websites reveals more than 100 North Koreans advertising themselves for work.
거래 이거 북한이라. 북한의 이름 거래 그러니까 아파트, 오피스, 수리. 안 비싸다. 질 높다. 블라디보스토크.
예.
To get a chance to talk to and get to know some North Koreans, the team rents a rundown flat, installs cameras, and hires North Koreans to do some renovation work.
어디서 오셨어요?
평양이요.
일하는 사람은 몇 명 정도 됩니까?
글쎄요. 제 생각에는 700~800명 정도 됩니다. 여기 블라디보스토크 근처에 모여 있어요. 요즘은 10만 원 정도는 벌어야 해요. 그래야 당자금 내고 나서 뭐가 좀 남죠. 그래야 가족들한테 보낼 돈도 생기죠. 솔직히 말하면 여기가 북한보다 나아요. 가족들만 아니면 북한에 안 돌아가죠. 참 안타깝지만 어쩌겠어요. 우리가 아니면 국가는 외환이 더 없겠죠.
While abroad, the North Korean authorities watch their workers very closely. They house them in barracks under strict surveillance. While everyone is out for work, the team discovers that the door of one of the barracks has been left open. Inside the building, it's all North Korea, replete with state propaganda.
It's exactly the same system, with or without the country. You work your day job because you have to pay the state, and you can do that through labor or you can do that through money. And then you have to make sure you and your family survive because the state can't take care of you. So you work in the evenings, you work in the weekends. It is the export of the North Korean system abroad. And it works.
Experts estimate that there are around 40,000 dollar heroes in Russia, making it one of the main destinations for the North Korean overseas forced labor system. They can be found everywhere, in rural Siberia and in big cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg. They've even helped build the stadiums for the 2018 Football World Cup. They have no freedom, live under strict surveillance, and have to work literally day and night. A former high-ranking South Korean government official, Kim Kwang-chal, has been studying North Korea and its political system for decades. Few people have better knowledge of how the regime organizes its money flow.
북한의 그 외환은 전부 다 중앙당으로 들어갑니다. 그러니까 그 돈은 인민 경제, 국민 경제를 위해서 쓰이는 게 아니라 김정은이 통치자금으로 쓰이고 있다고 보는 거죠. 일부에서 요즘 그 북한 핵무기 개발과 관련해서 핵무기 개발 자금으로 쓰이고 있다는 주장도 그래서 나오는 것입니다.
China is North Korea's close ally. Experts estimate that North Korea has more than 100,000 dollar heroes working here. Especially in the Dandong region on the border with North Korea, Chinese manufacturing companies are keen to employ North Koreans because Chinese wages are already too high to remain competitive. The demand for North Korean laborers is so great that the Chinese authorities organize work fairs to link up the people behind the North Korean work brigades with Chinese employers. To learn more about the working conditions of North Koreans in China, one of the undercover journalists poses as a businessman looking for new opportunities. The owner of a seafood factory agrees to show him around. The packaging plant is staffed with North Korean women. The factory owner says that he prefers North Koreans to Chinese workers because the North Koreans cost less and they work harder. The women live on the premises, so they can be put to work anytime, day and night. They sleep in dormitories and are only allowed to leave the premises once a month. The factory owner explains that their wages are collected by North Korean government officials, who also guard them 24 hours a day. Believing the team are potential big employers, one of these government officials has agreed to a meeting. He talks freely.
다들 나와서 일하고 싶죠. 하지만 공짜로 나올 수는 없죠. 배경이 좋은 사람만 나올 수 있어요. 하지만 과연 누가 그렇게 깨끗할 수 있을까요? 그렇기 때문에 거짓말을 해야죠. 북한 사람들은 다 중국에 나와서 값싼 노동자로 일하고 싶어 합니다.
노동자에게 돈을 직접 줄 방법은 없나요?
그것은 불가능합니다. 규정이 그렇습니다. 노동자에게 직접 주지 못하고 책임자에게 주도록 되어 있습니다.
노동자가 임금을 요구하면 어떻게 되나요?
바로 나가서 북한으로 돌아가야 합니다. 그리고 거기서 법적 절차를 당하죠.
China is North Korea's most important trading partner. It's estimated that in China alone, dollar heroes earn hundreds of millions of dollars per year for North Korea's regime, with its nuclear ambitions. Inside North Korea, the applicants are lured into the work program by false promises. But why don't they escape the horrible conditions once they're abroad?
Before North Korean laborers are selected to go abroad, they must pass an ideological test, which mainly consists of a family background check. So you need to have a family, preferably 2 children, who remain in North Korea. So if you would defect, if you would escape, your family would pay the price.
This system of controlling people abroad has a long history, as Park can testify.
그러니까 많이 보고 많이 아는 사람은 어쨌든 제거해 버리는 거고.
Despite all the dangers, Park decided to flee to South Korea and to leave his family alone in the north. His son was 15 years old at the time. Park didn't know whether he would ever see his family again. It took him another 2 years to get them to South Korea. Throughout this time, North Korean authorities put pressure on Park's family.
경찰이 이제 매일 와가지고 아빠 어디 가냐 할 때도 사실 이렇게 막 어디 있다고 말을 막 너무 하고 싶은 거지. 근데 이제 그걸 말하면 안 되니까 막 놀라는 척하고 엄마랑 아닐 거라고 한국에 북한 어디 있을 거라고 있는데 이제 돈 벌어가지고 오느라고 지금 금 캐러 갔다고.
잘했어.
그렇죠.
North Korea exerts an extraordinary level of control over its citizens. And because they fear possible consequences for their families, very few members of the overseas work brigades attempt to flee or defect. And while the vast sums of money these workers earn do little to benefit them or their families, it is of direct benefit to Kim Jong-un and those closest to him.
북한 경제를 궁정 경제와 인민 경제로 분리해서 한다. 그러나 중요한 것은 궁정 경제의 규모가 훨씬 월등하게 크다는 것이지요. 김정은이 일가의 통치를 위해서 모든 자금이 쓰여진다는 것입니다.
While huge funds flow to Kim Jong-un from Russia and China, there's also evidence of an appetite for North Korean forced labor from countries much further west, at the heart of the European Union, in Poland. Suspicions were raised when in August 2014, a North Korean welder died at a shipyard in Gdynia in the north of Poland. Remco Breuker has obtained the official report into the accident.
He was there alone. You should never be alone in such circumstances. There needs to be somebody to help you, especially in cases like this. He was set afire and his clothes lit like a Christmas tree. He came stumbling out as a human torch. His co-workers tried to douse the fire, to put out the fire. They couldn't. And he was taken to the hospital with 95% of his body burned, and he died.
Was this a one-off, or could this accident point to a larger scheme using North Korean labor? And if so, is it still going on? The investigation shifts to Poland, where a member of the team manages to get in touch with a North Korean shipyard worker. He had to move from Gdynia to another city as a result of the report into the accident being made public.
그디냐를 떠난 이유는 뭔가요?
그 당시 나는 그린야에 있는 조선소에서 일했어. 노르웨이 회사가 의뢰를 했었는데 북한 사람들이 일한다고 듣더니 우리를 일 못하게 하고 계약을 취소했어. 하지만 우리는 일하러 왔으니까 그냥 있을 수는 없잖아. 우리가 돈을 못 받은 지 2달이나 됐어. 우리 월급은 딴 데로 가는 거 알지? 우리가 막상 받는 거는 조금밖에 안 돼. 그런데 그 적은 돈으로 우리는 당에다 돈 내고 식비까지 내야 해. 남는 게 없는단 말이야. 나 너랑 대화한 거 들통나면 큰일 날 수도 있어. 하지만 드는 생각도 많고 묻고 싶은 것도 많은데 내일 다시 통화하자.
알겠습니다. 조심하세요.
그래 너도.
The labourer says that the Gdynia shipyard stopped employing North Koreans in 2016. But according to him, most of them are still in the country, just in different locations. He says some are working on construction sites in Lodz, and when the team arrives, they do see Asian workers. They even managed to follow them to their lodgings. But there is no way to safely talk to them, so the team needs to look elsewhere. Szczecin, in the northwest of Poland, close to Germany, is the other center of the country's shipbuilding industry. Polish shipyards are fighting to survive in a globalized market where pressure on wages is relentless. The North Korean labourer says that many of the work brigades were moved from the Gdynia region to here. At Szczecin's commercial register, certificates of registration for every company in the area are openly available. Could it be possible to find out which companies employ North Koreans? One company stands out, Red Shield. Its chairman has a Korean name, Pak Chong-ho. According to other documents obtained via the Labour Inspectorate, Red Shield contracts welders for the shipbuilding industry. They're offered the minimum wage of 2,000 zloty per month, around $600. Red Shield's certificate of registration has its company headquarters at Stolczynska 100D in Szczecin. But it turns out to be a decrepit building, a former school. Totally empty. The team decides to ask some locals if they know anything.
Dzień dobry. Ja mam takie pytanie. Czy panowie może słyszeli, czy tutaj w tej stoczni Koreańczycy pracują z północnej Korei? Tak?
No bo nieraz tak, wie pani, taki schemat.
Tak?
Tak, podkomendnego mieli takiego tam polityka.
Tak.
Ale teraz nie widzę tych przemarszy.
Ale może...
Już pod ziemią chodzą. I na południową zmianę też przyjeżdża taki samochód.
Tak.
On taki mało
ciemne szyby?
Ciemne szybki. To nieraz tu, nieraz tam jedzie.
Aha,
może tam siedzą. Generał.
No właśnie.
Ci takie tam, ale prawdopodobnie ich rozwożą po cichu. Tak.
Aha, aha. Dziękuję bardzo, do widzenia.
So there are indeed North Koreans working in this area. Not far away is a big shipbuilding facility, the Partner Shipyard. According to their website, they specialize in shipbuilding and repair. If Red Shield rents out North Korean welders to the shipbuilding industry, it's likely that at least some of them work here. To find out more, the team needs to get inside the shipyard. The journalists decide to pose as representatives of a recruitment agency working with German shipping companies. The cover story is that their shipping company clients are looking to outsource labor-intensive ship repair work to Poland. At the main gate of the partner shipyard, the team meets a security guard who is open and friendly.
O, dzień dobry. Mam takie pytanie. Jestem z agencji pracy Howeko i szukam ludzi do pracy, bo słyszałam właśnie, że tutaj są i chciałabym z nimi porozmawiać.
To są Koreańcy, bo to jest spółka. Ona jest tu, oni po całym świecie nie robią, bo oni i tu robią, i w innych firmach. To jest spółka w Polsce założona przez Koreańców. Dzień dobry, kluczu chcę i więcej nic nie umiem.
Aha, a oni są z Korei Północnej czy Południowej?
No z tej gorszej.
Z tej północnej Korei.
Im nawet nie wolno. On się boi, że coś zaraz gdzieś podpieprzy się.
Ale co, mają jakieś kary czy coś?
No to u nich jest dyscyplina, tak jak kiedyś było za komuny. No, nie wie pani, że nie wolno nic, bo się może go przyciągnąć na zachód. I tak mają nakazane, on nie chce rozmawiać, on tylko ma robić, więc nic.
A tu idzie jakiś, czy to nie jest Koreańczyk przypadkiem? Okej, to widzę. Dzień dobry, czy pan mówi po polsku? No. Bo my mamy agencję pracy, ja się nazywam Magdalena, to jest nasz inwestor, szukamy ludzi do pracy. Słyszałam właśnie, że tutaj są bardzo dobrzy specjaliści z Azji. Przemysłu stoczniowego, ślusarzy. Ilu macie tych ludzi w ogóle?
Koło 50.
Aha, koło 50. A skąd są w ogóle ci pracownicy?
Z Korei.
Aha, Korei, ale północnej. Aha, i tych 50 można by było wynająć? Jakbyśmy załatwili pozwolenia?
Nie, trzeba mamy tam swojego szefa, prezesa. Trzeba z nim tam
rozmawiać. A gdzie on jest, ten prezes? Jak do niego dotrzeć?
있으니까 여기 지금 내가 생각 나오다가 정문에 지금 내 아겐치아 브라치라는 당시 제가 이제 생각 나오다가 정문에 웬 여자하고 남자하고 찾아왔는데 소개하는 거는 남자는 도이치란드 투자가가 아주 좋은 투자를 하고 알았습니다. Zaraz nasz prezes tam idzie tam.
Aha,
Tutaj współpracujemy z tą stocznią, partnerem i oni dobrze wiedzą, nie? Czego oni mają korzyści, nie? Bo nasi chłopaki, pracownicy zawsze stacjonują w Polsce i tylko biorą takie urlop bezpłatny. termin wykonania jakiegoś tam przedmiotu.
Tak.
Jak ciągle to możemy Zapewniaśnie. Nie tak jak Polacy, 8 godzin robią i to pójdą. Nie tak jak po ciebie to...
Tak nawet dłużej pracują?
No.
Po ile godzin na przykład?
Na przykład po 10, po 12. I jeszcze tam bez przerwy na przykład to raz w miesiącu.
Wolne.
Tam, no, wolne zrobić.
Dzień dobry. Jest speaking Polish? Po polsku?
Dobry.
Dzień dobry.
여기 아시아 교환 사람들이 정말로 전문가라고라는 걸 듣고 왔는데
작업 대상은 어디서 일해야 되나?
Gdzie będą miejsce pracy?
Słucham?
Gdzie będą miejsce pracy?
No chcielibyśmy, żeby były w Polsce częściowo, ale też w Hamburgu. W stoczniach niemieckich.
부분적으로는 polska고 부분적으로는 Deutschland, 조선소에서
Hamburg, bo tam są stocznie.
함부르크에 조선소가 있는데
그러니까 우리는 폴스카 육내에서만 일할 수 있지 이게 밖으로 나갈 수 없다. 그 대상자가 이거 파트너니까 파트너 본사 가서 털어나는 게 더 좋을 거다.
Raziłbym, żebyście tam, bo tak jak wstąpiłem, stocznia partner jest to naszym głównym partnerem pracującym.
Mówią, że tu, czemu ja tu wpuściłem obcych ludzi. Już mam telefon od...
Then the manager hands over his business card. It's Red Shield's North Korean chairman, Pak Chong-ho. From all the information gathered so far, it's clear that North Koreans are running their own registered company in Szczecin. They employ dozens of workers, and it all seems totally legal.
통제하고 관할하는 그런 사람들이 있습니다. 예를 들면 그 보위원이라든가 또 행정적으로 그런 사람들을 관할하는 집단을 관할하는 그런 사람들이 꼭 있고 또 그들이 폴란드에서 그런 해당 회사들과 연결을 가지고 활동할 수 있도록 당연히 폴란드제 북한 대사관은 여기에 개입돼 있고 항상 이 문제를 폴란드 측과 협의하고 있습니다.
Right in the heart of Europe, there's clearly complicity between the Polish and the North Korean governments, despite EU and UN sanctions. The North Korean embassy refuses to answer questions. The Polish Labour Ministry too rejects any interview requests. However, in a statement they say that 1,034 work permits have been issued to Koreans since 2015, all in accordance with Polish law. The Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs responds to the accusation that the North Koreans work under conditions of forced labour by saying that checks are regularly carried out. And, quote, "The controls did not confirm that possible violations of the working conditions of North Korean workers could be considered as forced labour."
The insistence of the Polish government that there is nothing wrong is the insistence of a government that either does not know what's going on or chooses not to know what's going on in their own backyard. It's quite clear that the employment of North Koreans in Poland is a case of exploitation, and if you would ask me, it's a case of contemporary slavery. These are people who have nowhere else to go, who can't quit their jobs, who can't say no to anything that's asked of them, and they don't get paid for it.
Soon after, the team gets an opportunity to understand just how bleak life is for these North Korean workers. They make contact again with the shipyard worker who had to leave Gdynia.
가족은 보고 싶지 않나요?
당연히 보고 싶지.
가족들이랑 통화는 가능한가요?
아니, 그건 불가능해. 평양에서 외국으로부터 걸려오는 전화를 막아버려. 나는 늘 가족을 위해서 희생해왔어. 그렇기 때문에 폴란드로 오기도 했고. 하지만 받는 돈이 너무 적어. 그게 문제라고. 일요일이면 술이라도 마셔야 해. 그러지 않으면 미칠 것 같아. 너무 공허해.
술을 좀 줄이시는 게 좋을 것 같은데.
나도 알아. 하지만 어쩔 수가 없어. 안 마시면 견디질 못하겠어. 술을 마셔야 스트레스가 풀려. 북한 사람들은 술 마시면 스트레스가 준다고 생각해. 우리는 다 단체 생활을 해야 해. 자유가 없어. 이 상황을 잊기 위해 술을 마셔야 하는 거야. 그러지 않으면 못 견딘다고.
A couple of days later, the team contacts Red Shield's North Korean foreman to set up a meeting with his main clients, the managers of the partner shipyard.
Dzień dobry, mówi Magdalena Staniszewska, firma Howeko. My się widzieliśmy 2 dni temu, ja byłam z moim szefem z Hamburga u Państwa i rozmawialiśmy właśnie na temat współpracy. Bo chcielibyśmy wszystko sprawdzić, co i jak i generalnie spotkać się z Państwem najlepiej jeszcze raz i też z przedstawicielami tej firmy partner, stoczni partner. Okej, dobrze, to ja w takim razie się do Pana odezwę, jak uda mi się zorganizować jakieś spotkanie właśnie z którymś z prezesów tej stoczni partner.
Dobrze, dobra.
Dobra, to dziękuję za rozmowę, do widzenia.
Do widzenia.
In August and September 2017, North Korea conducted several missile tests that showed that the country was now capable of targeting the US mainland.
시험에서 단번에 성공함으로써 국방공업 건설사에 특기할 또 하나의 사변적인 기적을 창조했습니다.
This deepening hostility between the United States and North Korea threatens to disrupt the supply of low-cost labor that the Polish shipyard relies on. The team has arranged to meet one of the company's senior managers.
Dzień dobry.
Ich bin Geschäftsführer bei der Firma JMA. Das ist eine Tochtergesellschaft, die für Export verantwortlich ist von der Partnerstocznie. Partnerstocznie ist eine Holding, das ist eine Mütze. Und 100% sind wir exportorientiert. Also alle unsere Kunden sind entweder in Deutschland oder in Holland oder in Norwegen. Leute beschäftigt sind so gegen 300 Leute. Die Hälfte sind Polen, die Hälfte sind Ausländer. Meistens Ukraine, Usbekistan, manchmal noch ein bisschen aus Vietnam und Korea.
The manager offers to show the team around the shipyard.
Hier in diesem Gebäude wohnen die Asiaten und die Ukrainer zum Beispiel. Das ist unser Hotel für die Jungs.
Die wohnen ja gleich sozusagen am Arbeitsplatz.
Ja, damit die nicht zu viel wandern müssen, weil wenn die zum Beispiel in der Stadt wohnen würden, dann nach dem Wochenende, ich weiß nicht, ob die den Weg finden würden. Und hier ist okay.
Also, ob Sie zurückkommen
Alles unter Kontrolle irgendwie. Ja.
Aber jetzt mit dieser Nordkorea-Krise haben Sie da kein Problem? Also wird es nicht schwierig?
Das haben wir. Wir sind dafür vorbereitet. Wir können die entlassen von einem Tag auf den anderen, wenn wir einen Befehl bekommen. Und für uns zu riskant, wenn der nächste Raketen irgendwie schickt in die Luft, wie letztes mit der Japan. Also das betrifft uns stark.
Den Ponton bauen Sie für sich oder
nein, das ist
Auftrag?
Auftrag.
Auf einen
Holländer, ja.
Also wenn jetzt zum Beispiel Holländer und Deutsche und Polen zusammenarbeiten, kriegt man dann auch EU-Fördergelder?
Vieles ist von der EU-Gelder gefördert, ja. Hier nicht. Es wird aber bald, weil wir hier diese Halle bauen wollen mit der Presse- und Plasma-Technologielinien und so weiter.
Und dann bemühen Sie sich um die Förderung?
Ja, wir mussten aber holländische Technologielinien dorthin hinstecken, damit wir das bekommen. Ja. Aber wir haben das bekommen, also es funktioniert.
Das funktioniert, glaube ich, oder?
Hier auch, ja. Sehr
fleißig
und Also, wenn Sie die Polen fragen, ob die am Samstag oder Sonntag kommen, nein, keine Chance, nein, ich muss trinken und so weiter. Wenn Sie die Asiaten fragen, kein Problem. In der Sonne, in der Nacht, egal, immer. Ja. Also, wir müssen die haben.
Kriegen die dann Schichtzulage oder Wochenendzulage, dass sie so arbeiten? Oder
das fragen Sie mich schon zu viel, das ist internal Know-how.
Okay.
Diese Richtung, ja?
Ein Geheimnis.
The United Nations body monitoring the sanctions against North Korea is based in New York. So far, the UN has not stopped Poland from using the North Korean work brigades.
The panel's still investigating the Poland case, and we haven't received all the information we need from the Polish authorities to determine how far sanctions, if they have been violated. For example, you need to follow the money, and we need to get answers from Poland as to how the money is transferred.
There are no verified figures, but UN estimates suggest that North Korea's dollar heroes earn more than $1 billion per year. So how does this money find its way back to Pyongyang?
우선 첫째로서 폴란드 은행을 통해서 저들이 가지고 있는 자금을 중국이나 러시아와 같이 그런 큰 은행들 계좌로 북한 계좌로 이체하고 중국이나 러시아에서 현금을 인출해서 현금을 가지고 들어가는 방법이 있고 다른 하나는 폴란드 자체에서 은행에서 현금을 인출해 가지고 사람이 현금을 가지고 북한으로 이제 날아가는 그런 각양한 방도가 있을 수 있습니다.
Remco Breuker has come to New York to meet an investigator who has inside knowledge about North Korea's money flow. Cameras are not allowed in this meeting, but the next morning he explains what he's learned.
What happens is that overseas the money is changed into American dollars, into bills, cash money. And then a diplomat takes the money in the diplomatic pouch to Pyongyang, through Beijing usually. And this is important because the diplomat has diplomatic immunity. He travels on a diplomatic passport, which means he or she cannot be stopped at the national border, usually at least. It's a relatively safe way of transferring large sums of money back to Pyongyang.
With the average salary in North Korea so low, $1 billion or thereabouts can go a long way. But what exactly does the regime need foreign currency for?
그래서 여러 가지 핵무기 개발을 위해서 필요한 재료들을 구입할 필요가 있는데 그것은 북한에서 자체 생산되는 그런 재료들이 아니에요. 북한 경제는 굉장히 저급한 경제이기 때문에 그런 고급 기술이 적용되는 그런 제품들은 생산할 수가 없어요.
Even in the most recent round of sanctions late last year, the UN Security Council has not outright banned North Korea's use of overseas work brigades to bring in foreign exchange, despite some harsh language.
The price the North Korean leadership will pay for its continued nuclear and missile development will be the loss of 1/3 of its exports and hard currency. This is the most stringent set of sanctions on any country in a generation.
Under the terms of these sanctions, the North Korean government will still be permitted to keep its dollar heroes abroad for another 2 years.
북한의 핵과 미사일 개발을 멈춰 세우기에는 충분하냐? 당연히 저는 충분하지 않다고 말할 수 있습니다. 왜? 현재의 노동력과 현재의 그런 작업 조건이 계속 유지된다면 그들은 계속 폴란드와 같은 그런 유럽에서 북한의 핵과 미사일로 흘러가 들어가는 그런 자금 벌이 조성 활동은 계속 진행된다고 봐야 하겠죠.
Why is the UN Security Council so hesitant to put an immediate stop to North Korea's overseas work program?
Well, I think there are two reasons, Russia and China. And those are coincidentally, or not so coincidentally, also the two largest hosts of North Korean workers. So they make lots of money by using these North Korean workers. Both states are loath, I think, to let this go. If you sanction forced labor, if you really sanction it, both China and Russia would have to put a stop to what's going on. Neither of those states want that. That's very clear.
Back in Poland, there's what might be a final opportunity to meet with the senior management of the partner shipyard. How can they justify employing North Koreans who are being used and controlled by the regime? They are unapologetic.
Die sagen, dass dadurch wird das Regime unterstützt und das wollen die Leute nicht. Wir verstehen das, obwohl auf der anderen Seite, wenn die einfachen Arbeiter bekommen was davon, ob die was bekommen, ist auch eine andere Frage, aber wenn die was bekommen, das ist auch schon was, weil wir haben einen Blick von der Welt und die haben ein paar Zloty oder ein paar Dollar und das hilft wahrscheinlich auch der ganzen Familie dort.
해외에 나와 있는 노동자들이 지금 해외에 나와서 벌어들이고 있는 그 돈이 그들의 가족을 먹여 살리고 하는 데는 그게 큰 몫입니다. 그러면 그것 때문에 우리가 이 제재를 가지 못한다. 그러면 핵과 그러면 계속 지금 나날이 늘어나고 있는 북한의 핵과 ICBM의 고도한 능력은 그러면 우리가 어떻게 멈춰 세우겠느냐. 원래는 지금과 같은 그런 수준의 제재가 이미 오래전에 이제 가해졌어야 했습니다. 그런데 세계는 지금껏 북핵 문제와 미사일 문제를 너무 오랫동안 방치하고
Unchecked by the international community, North Korea continues to send work brigades all over the world, about 150,000 heroes in all. China has around 100,000, Russia around 40,000, and there's evidence of North Koreans working in Africa, in Cambodia, in Malaysia, Mongolia, Kuwait, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Oman, and Myanmar, as well as Poland.
This is not something that is just concocted by evil men in North Korea and Poland. If we wouldn't buy clothes made by North Koreans, and we would have to pay higher wages, and even a Chinese laborer earns more than a North Korean laborer, we would feel it in our wallets. We would have to pay more for the clothes you and I are probably wearing at this very moment.
North Korean work brigades earn the regime upwards of $1 billion a year. And with a time limit of 2 years due to UN sanctions, there are predictions that Kim Jong-un will be looking to increase both the number of forced labourers he sends overseas and to ratchet up the pressure on them to produce even more foreign exchange. And with the drive for ever lower wages, the rest of the world is complicit in helping him fulfill his ambitions.